Three, two. It is my pleasure to bring in a dear friend of mine, an Amarillo icon. You've seen her on television. You know her. Her name is Beth Duke. She is all things. Obviously, she is the head of Center City here in Amarillo, but there are so many titles that we could put on you. Beth, thank you so much for coming in. And, you know, there's this time, you know, we always talk on Studio 4,
Yes.
and it's always in these little 4-minute segments, and there was so much more that I wanted to talk about. So I said, let's bring her in, and let's talk about
I
it.
love that.
Beth, a lot of people know you obviously for your work at Center City, but I really got to know you and found out who you were with all of your wonderful work at the Amarillo Globe News. How did all of that get started? What brought you to Amarillo?
Oh, my goodness. Helium brought me to Amarillo. My
Helium.
dad was a mechanical engineer for the helium activity, and
Okay.
he was a brainiac, and he designed instrumentation that froze helium out of natural gas to cryogenic temperatures. So you can imagine every science experiment I ever did at school, you know,
you
could,
won.
You could ace it. Oh, yeah.
All of the science fairs, you took care of business. So you guys moved here because obviously we had
That's
a
right.
lot of helium at
That's
the
right.
time.
And Dad's figured out this is where helium was. If he moved his family here, he wouldn't be transferred. So we were here, and I was born here in Amarillo, and I am a native, married to a native. I passed by the apartment my folks lived in every day going to work downtown.
How fun is that?
Isn't that weird?
And you went to Coronado, right?
I went to Coronado Elementary School. I went to Beautiful Savior Lutheran Church kindergarten.
Okay.
Very nice people, Lutherans. And I went to Coronado Elementary School when it was fairly new.
Yeah.
My mother was on the PTA, and she had to raise money so we could get a sidewalk.
And by the way, if you're walking on that sidewalk, then you know where it came from.
That's right.
Beth, your love for journalism started very early on. There at Coronado, really, right?
It started at Coronado. We had a newspaper called the Coronado Conquistador. And, you know, talk about our deadlines today. You know, it's 24-hour deadlines.
Right.
And we worked so hard. Our paper came out once every 6 weeks. And for those of you who remember old school supplies, it was mimeograph.
Oh, wow.
And we stood there and trained the crank to crank out our newspapers. And I was a columnist, and our dear friend, the late Alan Dawson, who had Style Magazine, he was a sports editor. And we all got our start at Coronado, and then I worked on the papers at Austin Junior High, Tascosa High School. I was editor of the paper at AC, and then editor at the paper at Baylor.
You are just a Hall of Famer.
I don't know about that.
Yes,
but,
you are.
I would just say, you know, when I was growing up, I didn't have a lot of role models for professional women.
There weren't a lot in the
Women
industry at the
were
time.
nurses or teachers, full-time moms, maybe secretaries, and I was a member of a very exclusive club at Coronado. Did you ever get my weekly reader at school?
The Weekly Reader, yes.
Well, they had a club called the Scholastic Book Club, and I was allowed to order books. And I ordered one called Nellie Bly, Girl Reporter. And that's the first time I realized that girls could do journalism. And so I was gung-ho after that forever. And that's a difference reading a biography about somebody can make.
And this is a great transition. So you're at Baylor.
I'm at Baylor.
You come back home for the
right.
summer to do an internship
That's
at
right.
Amarillo Globe News. And is it okay if I say you were smitten summer?
We were smitten. Oh yeah. I met Ralph, and I just knew he was the one, and he knew I was the one. And I went back to Baylor, finished up, and then we married the next year. And our 49th wedding anniversary will be August 14th.
Oh my gosh, I
I
love
know,
that.
isn't that something?
Yeah, sweet Ralph. Okay, so Beth, I want to kind of dive in a little bit. When you started working at the Globe News, you had a lot of wonderful role models. As you said, there weren't a whole lot of women in journalism at that point.
That's right.
But Amarillo Globe News had a wonderful contingency of women leading the way. Tell me about that.
It was amazing. You know, apparently during World War II, all the able-bodied guys were drafted, and they hired a lot of women to work in those roles. Well, when I got there in the late 70s, some of those women were nearing retirement, but they still were working on the paper every day. And that's back when we had 2 editions of the afternoon paper at least 2 or 3 editions of the morning paper. And it was constant deadline with typewriters and lead type and all those things. So they really knew journalism when it was in that glory day. Yeah. Well, some of the editors were Jean Wade. She was retired Women's Army Corps. Mary Kate Tripp, longtime regional editor who taught me a lot. Bonnie Merriman, a features editor. Just so many great women that I looked up to, and they were my first supervisors and taught me a lot about journalism.
What were some of the things that really stood out as they were talking to you about journalism early on that you even still think about today? Some of those lessons that were taught.
Deadlines. You cannot work on it till it's perfect. It will never be perfect. Sometimes you have to go with it. And they instilled in me a drive to never, ever misquote someone. My penmanship is terrible because I take good notes. Fortunately, I can read shorthand upside down on a desk. That's very helpful sometimes.
I bet it is.
And you just all the lessons you learn along the way. Doing your homework. You know, I had the opportunity to interview so many famous people, and there were nights I stayed up the night before reading their book so I wouldn't go into the interview cold.
Let's talk about some of those interviews. What are the top 4 interviews, top 4 people that you met, that you were able to meet through your work at the Amarillo Globe News? Give me your top 4.
I think the first would be Nellie Connolly. I was able to get a private interview with her when her husband was running for office. And that was back during the time when the women were assigned the wives and the first ladies, and the guys were assigned the hard-hitting political candidates.
You didn't even get to interview men. And this was not
usually,
that long ago. But for the most
usually.
part, they were just like, Beth, you do this interview.
And Nellie Connolly, I really had to put my emotions aside because I kept thinking, this is the last person who spoke to John F. Kennedy before he was killed. And I felt like I touched history.
What did you ask her about that?
I did, and part of it was from her memoir. And she said that after her husband was finally out of the hospital, and she went one day to her hairdresser, and her hairdresser said that you have a gray streak now in your hair, and it was from
that traumatic event.
All the stress she had been through, and it just reminds us the physical impact in addition to the political and national impact.
Okay, so that's number 1.
That's number 1.
Who comes in at number 2?
Well, that's a tough one. I think Rosalind Carter was another one. She and Jimmy came here to help with Habitat for Humanity, and she was so amazing. And she talked a lot about on those first campaign trails when she was doing radio interviews, they always ask her for her favorite recipes. They always ask her for, balancing the home and everything like that. And she would have to, in her gracious Southern Magnolia way, she would have to redirect it back to policy because she truly was a full-time partner. I believe she even sat in on many cabinet meetings, and she was a true partner in everything President Carter did. And then in their life after the White House, what a great example of public service. You know.
Up until the very end.
That's right.
With the Habitat for
That's
Humanity.
right.
I knew that was near and dear to them. Okay, that's number 2. Coming in at number 3.
Okay. First Lady Barbara Bush, she was here to speak to the Republican Women's Club. I can't really remember what George was running for then, but she was representing that.
Barbara Bush came. I was out at Boys Ranch because she came out to Boys
That's
Ranch
right,
at that time.
that's
so
right.
this would have been circa 86 to 88, in that ballpark, somewhere in there. It could have been 88. I'm not sure, but I remember I was blown away. That was the first, in my mind, the first really important person that I got to be within an arm's reach of. Yes. And there's a picture that Boys Ranch has that I'm in the background. She's talking to some boys, and I'm back there looking around. I was so excited about that. So that's a good one.
It is. And the funny part was a again, this is about hair, but I went to our Globe News Library, pulled a picture like you do. At that time, it was a real print picture of her, and turned it into the copy desk to run with my story because I had done a preview of her coming. When she arrived, and I didn't know this, when she came to Amarillo that time, she had decided she was going gray.
Oh, and you had...
And she gave me she teased me so much about running that brunette picture when now that wasn't her. And that's one thing, because the next one I was going to mention was Sybil Harrington. But that's one thing about these amazing women. Many times we never knew what a great sense of humor they had or the way they strategically thought about what they were saying and doing, and in some cases in relation to their spouse. And I wish people could have known what great sense of humor they had.
You really got to know Sybil Harrington.
I did.
And she has left an unforgettable mark here on the High Plains. It's not by accident that you see her name and the legacy that she left behind. What was it like? What was she like?
Oh, my goodness. My first assignment, the reason I met her, I was assigned Woman of the Year stories. The boys were assigned the Man of the Year stories. So I always did the Woman of the Year stories until one year they let me do both. So that was a breakthrough. But I was assigned to get an interview with Mrs. H, and she didn't really want to. And, of course, that was a time we had to keep it secret. We don't tell them they're being Woman of the Year. I had to interview her on the pretense they had just opened the Harrington Cancer Center. And so I went to her home, which was...
At this point, where was it?
At this point, she had already endowed the family home on Polk Street as a house museum. Yeah. And she was living in what Amarilloans call the mother-in-law house behind the Bivens Mansion on Rusk. Okay. And I went to her home, which was lovely, and sat down to do the interview. And she had put several conditions on the interview, all of which were reasonable. Reasonable is fine. But what I remember the most, she didn't want a picture taken. And the rule was, we needed that current picture. Well, I told her that she had to have a picture, but I would let her choose. And so she picked out one that was fabulous. I still love that picture. I think I still have the slide. Yeah. But it was a picture of her, and right over this shoulder was a picture of Dawn. And she really felt like that was her job, to preserve and protect and continue Dawn's legacy. And to me, that picture told the story. And after that, it just kind of developed a little bit of trust. So I didn't misquote her, and I stood up to all my promises, and we became friends. And oh my goodness, one thing I learned from her, and this is good advice for anyone, a lot of times when she was mad about something, and I'm sure there were many times it didn't go her way, but when she was mad about something, she would write a letter and just pour it out, and then she would toss it in the fireplace. That's pretty good advice, because sometimes, now with posting and social media,
so rapid.
People are just too quick to hit post. And she was smart enough to know, write it down, get it out, throw it in the fireplace. Oh, if that fireplace could talk.
I was about to say, I mean, good night. I think of, and that's some of the advice that I give to my kids, not so much as throwing it in the fireplace, but hey, give it let's wait 24 hours.
Sleep on it.
So let's sleep on it. Mm-hmm. Because I think our initial reaction very seldom is ever the right one, because we're mad or I love that. Write it down, throw it in the fireplace.
That's right.
Oh, that's so good.
And she taught me that for her, philanthropy was not a hobby or anything. It was a responsibility. Yeah. And she taught me that you need to not just give funds, but it needs to be to something that's sustainable, and really think it through. And over the years, we've seen many of the things she started are thriving. Right. And you see, the Dawn Harrington Discovery Center, She helped found the food bank. I was on that committee with her. She helped so many things. And I really do feel a personal obligation to keep her legacy and be one of the people who knew her. I got to visit her home in Phoenix, and I was standing closer than I am to you in front of her Monet.
Really?
And I had never known anyone who owned an original Monet.
I still don't. So at least I'm sitting now next to somebody who was close to a Monet. I went. We got to see some. We went to Paris, and that was
It
remarkable.
takes your breath away.
Yeah, it does. It just is something else. So you, all these wonderful people you interviewed. You had such a storied career, really, at the Amarillo Globe News, and talk about how when that was a section of your life. Tell me how that came to a close.
Oh my goodness. It was just a different time. You know, the paper was winding down. We had already closed the afternoon paper.
Yeah.
I think Amarillo and Denton were the last two Texas dailies that had an afternoon paper. And the afternoon paper, that was some of the glory days. I mean, when the big Oprah Winfrey trial was here in Amarillo, we had to have that afternoon paper in the news racks on the courthouse square by 11 a.m. before court let out at noon. And then we came back with one at 2 o'clock. So we had a reporter who would come out at break and send another one in, and then we would put out a paper. And we were putting in sadly, we're putting in new obituaries, new headlines, everything. And then the morning paper, the first deadline was at 7, and that was a regional edition. And the second deadline was at 11, and that was the final. And then it was in the last days of Put Powell and his successor, Garrett Von Netzer, and we would a lot of times have an extra edition there because we would hold a deadline for high school football scores. Wow. And I've thought about you guys a lot. I mean, we know this is election week, and those late elections and the night of the Bush-Gore election.
Oh goodness!
We finally had, hit the button and press was going, and I got my car. I was almost to Georgia, and Ralph called and said, "You probably want to turn back around," because that's when nobody had conceded, and it wasn't over. And it wasn't over for a while.
The hanging Chad. Mm-hmm. I remember I was working here. We had just moved into this building not too long ago. We had moved into this building from our old place out by Wonderland, and I was still in sports. I hadn't transitioned into news yet, and so I remember that was crazy. Those were some glory days of the Amarillo Globe News, and again,
so much fun. Working with the Associated Press. We had so many famous people coming through our office to use the system. And, I really did get to stop the press a couple of times.
Like I know everybody knows that expression. Well, stop the presses. That is an actual thing. There is a button you hit and
you better have a great reason because those pressmen have a temper. And if you didn't have a really good reason, it was going to be hard on you.
I got a little bit of a tour back in the day. I don't remember. I was talking with Lance about something and came up to the paper, and I got to go around and see the actual room back in the day where the paper would it was impressive.
It is.
It's impressive. And then again.
And it was great because people would say, "What'd you do today?" "I did this." You could show them. But it changed a lot, and, a lot of it was the internet, but also just the habit. With the 24-hour deadlines and constant pressure, a printed paper is always going to be a little bit behind just because of the production.
I don't know about you. I miss the smell of a newspaper.
Oh, I still have it. I still take it.
You still take it?
Oh, yeah.
I miss that. And then getting it, there'd be a little bit on your finger. I really do that.
You never wore white if you worked there.
There, no way.
You would be smudged up.
So that is Beth Duke, the Amarillo Globe News era. And let's talk about the Center City era. What a great era you're in right now.
I am. It is just amazing. Everyone should be joyful about a second act like I've had because I left the paper in 2005 after almost 30 years. I didn't know what I was going to do. And I immediately took a trip to Chicago and was an international counselor at Rotary Youth Leadership Camp, and kind of had some time to think about my goals. Yeah. And when I came home, my friend Garrett Von Netzer, he said, "You need to go apply for the job at Center City." And I said, "Well, Garrett, I think they've already closed that." And he said, "You're not listening." As only somebody who is 6'5" and an old coach can say. He said, "You're not listening." I said, "Okay." So my minor was history. I never knew what to do with it. I felt like journalism was daily history. Yeah. And I loved Amarillo. My car would come downtown anyway because it'd been doing that since the 70s. Right. And I had an interview, and it turned out everybody on the committee was my friends. I mean, I'd worked with Wes Reeves at the paper. Garrett was on there, Gary Pittner, that current city manager at that time, Alan Taylor. And I convinced him I could do this job. And I said, "I think what you need is messaging, and you need the community to understand why we're doing what we're doing, and that we're doing it for the whole community while we're saving history." And it was kind of funny. My predecessor, Penelope Davies, she had a thing where if someone did something nice for her, she baked you a blueberry cake. And so, in a job interview, you get to that point where they say, "Now, do you have any questions or concerns?" And that's always the question you go, "Oh." Well, I said, "I know there's been some concern that there might not be enough baked goods." And I had made everybody a little box of my famous cream cheese brownies.
And you got the job. It worked.
I don't know if it was all that, but I just wanted to soften the mood a little bit. And most people don't realize that for a while at the paper, I was travel editor. For a while at the paper, I was food editor. And, that's one thing that makes my hobbies food and travel.
You talked about back in the day when they would, when the former First Lady, Mrs. Carter, would ask her about her favorite recipe. Yep. So now that you brought that up, I have to ask you, what's your favorite recipe?
Oh, my goodness. Well, my go-to is cream cheese brownies.
I was going to say, it has to be.
Cream cheese brownies. I'll have to do that for you guys sometime. But that's my favorite. And I have shown up at different places with them. And, it's really hard to be unhappy with someone who's bringing you cream cheese brownies. Well,
so I need to full disclosure for everybody listening or watching this. So anytime Beth comes in, this is a true story. She never comes empty-handed. I don't know if this is something that you've just always done, that they've taught you with the cream cheese brownies or whatever. But if we're interviewing Beth on Studio 4, we're doing that today. And what are we talking about today,
The
Betty?
historic downtown tour.
Okay, so we're getting ready to talk about that. But she always brings it. We get cookie, this, that, and the other. I'm going to hold you to your promise of these cheesecake brownies. Okay. I can't wait to try that. What would you say? I mean, you have been a part of Center City from the very get-go. This is how long now? How many years?
19 years.
19 years. We're coming up on 20. I can't believe it. But for those of you who have been here, grew up here, Center City is not the same anymore. It has transformed. We used to have no new buildings, no new life. There wasn't anything happening.
Broken glass, empty stores.
Yes. And now, just block by block, there's some great things happening. I mean, we've got the Barfield. That is phenomenal. We have 2 hotels. And 3 now. And they said we couldn't have one.
They said it wouldn't work. A hotel wouldn't work off I-40. And fortunately, Newcrest Image, who had started with the Courtyard by Marriott, they ran the data, and they figured out there were enough people working downtown whose jobs brought them downtown, who needed a downtown hotel, and Marriott took a chance on our beautiful historic Courtyard at the Marriott.
And there, if you haven't been downtown, we have really 3 beautiful places down here.
2 on the National Register.
This one's going to be a harder question for you as kind of we wind down. Because you're such a phenomenal, I don't know, you carry the beacon of Amarillo everywhere you go.
I do.
And just a 5-minute conversation, somebody can tell that you just absolutely love Amarillo with everything you have. What is your favorite thing about Amarillo?
I think my favorite thing is is a sense of place. Every town has its own personality. And, you know, I've always said if you were beamed down into a regional shopping mall, you wouldn't know what town you're in. They all have the same stores. They have the same layout. But when you see that Paramount sign that we redid in 2006, we knew it wasn't the biggest project we'd ever do, but we did crowdfunding before it was cool.
Right.
We had a buy a bulb campaign so that everyone would feel like it was their sign, their downtown.
I remember when we did the big lighting.
Yes, and that was in 2006. And I think when I see that Paramount sign and historic Polk Street and the buildings we've been able to save, it just makes me realize that we've given it a sense of place. And I think one thing that shows that the new City Hall in that 1928 building, that shows we figure out a way to use what's good and to keep what's good.
So we're coming up on the 20th anniversary. Where do you want to see Amarillo go in the next 20?
You know, I think we do have a long way to go. There's still a lot of things we want to do. That whole area around the historic Santa Fe Depot, I've had the Texas Main Street architects here. They've done a vision board. We have some great buildings now downtown that are getting a new life. The Crest building is getting a new life. And it just makes me happy when I see these old structures and someone has a vision and the wherewithal to be able to give it a new life. It will never be a department store again. It will never be what it was before, but it can be something better. And there is strength in those old buildings. You know, some of the buildings that have not stayed the course were built in the 80s, and we've already had to replace them. But some of these go back to 1928, like the Barfield, and it's still standing.
It is. That reminds me of that song, the Elton John, I'm Still Standing. All right, as we round things out, a couple of fun questions for you. So you and Ralph, where would you go on a date night? Where's one of your favorite date night places here in Amarillo?
Well, let's see. We really like anything downtown, of course. And I think Toscana at the Barfield is a favorite. And I'm just so proud of that jewel. Not only is it our downtown, it's on Polk Street and Route 66.
They just got a new chef there, by the way. Who
Yes,
has
and a new
ties to our-
menu.
Marcus is just great. So there's a new menu there.
And that's where I saw Santa Elliott, so go figure.
That's kind of fun, right? I love OHMS. That's another one of the places
Mary
downtown.
Fuller was downtown before downtown was cool.
100%.
And we celebrate that. We helped her with a facade grant to outline her building in green, just so people downtown at the Barfield and other places would say, we're here.
Hey, listen, Miss Fuller got me eating broccoli. I would not touch broccoli, and I went in there, that broccoli appetizer that she had, is just unbelievable.
Oh, yeah, that kept us going during pandemic. We did curbside every Friday night.
Yeah.
Prime rib and that broccoli.
Tell me your favorite hidden gem in Amarillo. What is a hidden gem in Amarillo?
Ooh, that's tough. Because once I say it's not a secret. I don't know.
I know that's a hard one.
That is a hard one. My hidden gem is kind of my home. I have
That's a good answer.
I have a collection. I run a home for unwed typewriters. I only have 38. Do you think I have a problem?
38?
I don't know. I can't stand. That's how somebody made their living. That's how somebody.
Yeah.
That's what somebody through school. Yeah. And I can't stand to see them on the trash heap. I have one that Tommy Thompson, the Pulitzer Prize winning editor of the Globe News, owned. I have some famous ones in there, and they just give me joy because each one of them has a history.
And they've written a lot of stories.
Oh, yeah, if they could talk. Oh,
my goodness.
Yeah.
I love those old typewriters. I took typing class with Mrs. Waldrop out at Cal Farley's Boys Ranch. Best decision I ever made.
Yeah.
It changed. I went on to compete in UIL typing.
See?
And it stuck around, so that's good.
And you learned on a blind keyboard.
Yep.
Yep. Manual, electric.
It was electric
Okay.
by that time. It was one of the old IBM, big red IBM typewriter.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was a good one. Beth, thank you so much for coming in, for sharing your story, and being such an advocate for the city of Amarillo. Not just, I know Center City is incredibly unique and it's what you do, but you overall are an advocate for Amarillo and the people who call it home.
And We're making downtown everybody's neighborhood. It's in the center of the
Yeah.
city, and why not come down there and celebrate our history?
All right. Well, Beth, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
And thanks for letting us talk about it. I appreciate it.
I had a good time.